The next two sections, which are section 40 and 41, are tied together. How this is going to work is that here in this first section, we're going to have a visual review of the entry summary very quickly, what we're looking at here, just to give people an idea of what it looks like and all the different fields that are required in order to submit a comprehensive and accurate customs entry. After we have a fairly quick look at this slide, we're going to go through the official customs document that explains how to fill out all of these fields, and we will illustrate why we were so insistent throughout this module on getting timely, complete, consistent, and correct information, because it all finds its way here. In the second section, which again is section 41, we're going to look at an actual completed entry and then go through the fields again. This is a comprehensive treatment of the subject. Let's zoom in on the top part of this and just run through it fairly quickly, because again, we're going to go and explain all the fields and then look at an actual completed 7501. We can see on the left-hand side, it is indeed an entry summary. But starting with number 1, the filer code and entry number. What type of entry is it? Consumption entry, etc. Dates, the surety number, that's the bond type. Number 6, the port code, entry dates, etc. Just to be clear, we're going to go through this actually using a completed 7501. We're not hurrying through this. We're just giving an idea of what it looks like. Other things we can see. Moving over to the left. Who's the carrier? What's the mode of transport? Country of origin. Bill of lading number. Moving down to the description of the merchandise. What is it? What's its classification? What is the entered value? What is the duty rate? And by the way, of course, once these fields are completed, the fields with the charges are populated automatically. Once again, just an illustration of how things look. Let's run through all of the fields as explained by CBP, and then we'll come back and do it again, looking at a real one. And before we begin, of course, the image on the right-hand side is just a smaller version of that 7501. Let's run through it. Block 1, it's the entry number. This is a 3-digit customs issued filer code. Who's the filer? A self-filer as the importer or a customs broker. A 7-digit entry number and 1 check digit. Block 2, the entry type. It is the type of entry by 2-digit code. We said this already. A consumption entry, for example, being 01, but it could be a foreign trade zone entry. Could be any variety of things. Block 3, the summary date, the actual date the entry summary was prepared. Block 4, the surety number, and we recognize that word surety as meaning a bond, basically. In Block 4, Customs is looking for the 3-digit number to identify the surety company on the bond to make sure that the bond is legit. Block 5, what type of bond is it? We explained this many sections ago, too. Is it a continuous bond or a single entry bond? The number 8 signifies a continuous bond, 9 for single entry. As we proceed along, imagine an entry writer using the information off of commercial invoices, packing lists, transport docs, an item master file to complete these fields. And in some instances, auto-populate these fields so the time it takes to do the entry is compressed. Port code, which is 4 digits, the port where merchandise was entered into the United States. The entry date, which is the date of goods release. Block 8, the importing carrier, which will differ by mode. For example, in the case of ocean freight, it's the name of the vessel. We'll see that in our upcoming real-world example. Air freight, conversely, is the 2-digit IATA code of the airline. We talked about IATA in detail during our air freight module. Block 9, mode of transport. It's a 2-digit numeric code For example, 11 is vessel but containerized cargo, whereas 10 is a maritime shipment but as bulk cargo, merchandise that is not in a container. Block 10, we know all about this, country of origin, which is a 2-letter uppercase code. For example, and as we will see in the upcoming real-world depiction of a 7501, Italy just happens to be capital I, capital T. Block 11 is the import date, and that is the date on which conveyance, the mode of transport, arrived within U.S. port limits. Could be a truck, could be a train coming in from Canada or Mexico, or a ship or an airline. Block 12. We've talked over and over and over again about the importance of a bill of lading or an airway bill number. That's where this number goes. Block 13, the manufacturer ID. Believe it or not, every overseas company that has exported to the United States has been assigned a manufacturer ID number. It is a unique number that identifies the invoicing party. That's the vendor overseas. It's an alphanumeric number. We'll see that example in just a bit. Block 14, the exporting country. And that's not necessarily the country of origin, by the way. Doesn't have to be. But in Block 14, it's a 2-letter uppercase code identifying the country of export. Block 15, export date, date on which the conveyance departed, the last port in the exporting country. Blocks 16 and 17 are related to a scenario specific to an IT, a type of entry that we spoke of several sections ago, an immediate transportation. If indeed an entry is under an IT, we would have to put the IT number in Block 16, and in 17, the IT date, which would be obtained from the 7512, which is the actual custom form used to execute an IT. Block 18 deals with missing documents. That's a 2-digit code to denote any missing docs at the time of entry. As a quick example, if a commercial invoice was missing at the time of entry, it would be denoted by a 01. Block 19, foreign port of lading. That's a numerical code identifying the export port. And Block 20, the U.S. port of unlading, is a 4-digit port code of the port where goods were offloaded, truck being excluded. Block 21, location of goods. This really depends on the mode of transport. For ocean, it could be a pier or a site where goods are available for inspection. For air freight, but also the firm's code can be used. You will recall that we talked about firm's codes and U.S. air freight shipments having to have a firm's code. That's where this goes. Block 22, the consignee number. That's the consignee in the United States. Likely to be the same as the importer number found in Block 23, but it doesn't have to be. For Block 22, if it's a company, it's the EIN number, the employer identification number, which of course must correspond to Customs Form 5106, which is used to identify a first-time importer for consumption entry and is used out into the future. We talked about that. Block 23, the importer number, likely to be the same as Block 22. For a company, it's the EIN. Block 24, as a reference number for a company, the EIN as well. Block 25, ultimate consignee name and address. That's the individual or firm purchasing the merchandise or to whom the goods are consigned, likely to be the importer of record. Block 26, the importer of record name and address. Most of the time, not always, most of the time, the importer of record name and address and the ultimate consignee are going to be the same. The delivery address might be different for the ultimate consignee, but the importer of record likely to be the same. Doesn't have to be, though. In Block 26, full name and address of that importer of record, which is defined as the owner or purchaser of the goods. Block 27, the line number. This is where the actual product begins to be classified. A commodity from one country covered by a line that includes net quantity, entered value, the HTS, and the rate of duty. This is a big one, certainly from a classification perspective, because all of the work we did, for example, around classification, the results of those exercises would appear here. Depending on how many products we're importing in an entry, it might be 1. It could be 100. It depends on what we're bringing in. This is where all of that line item specific information goes. Block 28, the description of the merchandise. Of course, a description of an article in sufficient detail to determine its HTS classification. Block 29, the corresponding HTS number, where we go from a prose-based description of the goods to its classification using the HTS, and here is where the HTS number goes. Normally the 10-digit HTS number, but it can also include any anti-dumping or countervailing duty case numbers. Needless to say, 28 and 29, for purposes of what we're teaching, are pretty important. Block 30, gross weight / manifest quantity. That's the gross weight in kilos, but a manifest quantity consistent with that on the transport document. We need to make that distinction too. Block 31, the net quantity in HTS units. We talked about this specifically. It's the unit of measure specified in the HTS. We'll recall pairs of shoes, liters, kilos, and it could be drums of chemicals or oil for that matter. Block 32, related to valuation, is the entered value of the goods, the US dollar value of the price actually paid or payable. That's where that goes. C&V, classification and valuation. The results of those exercises go right into the 7501. Block 33, the HTS US rate, the rate of duty. That ad valorem rate that we've talked about. In addition to the rate of duty, it can also include in this field anti-dumping or countervailing duty rate, because it's always going to be higher if it is an anti-dumping or a CVD case. Any internal revenue tax, which is specific to alcohol, or a visa number for textiles and wearing apparel that is subject to a visa requirement. Block 34, the duty itself, the dollar amount owed in duty and any internal revenue tax. This is the estimated duty. Remember, a 7501 is an estimate of duties. Internal revenue tax, anti-dumping, countervailing duties, all go potentially in Block 34. Usually it's the estimated duty because most importers aren't subject to these other charges. Block 35, the total entered value. Look at the definition. Total of price actually paid or payable. We went over that incessantly as well. 36, it's a declaration by the importer of record. It's a statement from the IOR that they are the owner of the goods, that the purchase itself is valid, that it's actually real, and that the information is accurate. Block 37, the total duty amount owed. 38, any taxes owed. 39, other, which we'll look at in some detail in our upcoming example. But any other fees, typically merchandise processing fee, harbor maintenance fee, but also any other anti-dumping and countervailing duties. And they all have to be itemized in what is called the summary of other fees block. And then block 40 is the total, the sum of all the blocks, the total amount of money owed to the U.S. government. Block 41, the declarant's name, title, signature, and date. That's the signer of the 7501, which can be the custom house broker, obviously. Block 42, the broker/filer information, broker or self-filer name, address, and telephone. And then block 33, the import file number. That's the internal reference number used by the broker/filer. As we can see, some pretty detailed stuff, all the way up to 43 fields. That gives us a good idea on the front end of what a 7501 looks like. We went through each and every block, talked about them in some detail. Now we're going to come back in the next section, because we're finished for now, and look at an actual entry summary. The next section actually has 2 slides in it. We'll be on it for a while, though. Don't be misled by how long that section is going to be. We'll see you then.